Hi, Trish. Hi, Catherine. Sorry, there's not much
I get
chat. Andrada was recapping yesterday for me, and we didn't press record until now.
because we assume you all caught up with the actual reading by the time you get to this one. All right, then. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. So this is the month of March, chapter 2, a most unexpected result. Oblong and Aurelia greeted the morning of the spring equinox in contrasting moods. Oblong was not one of nature's early risers. Aurelia was. He peered in horror at the mirror. She looked with amusement in hers, looking absurd with ill-matched plumes in unexpected places and a bright orange cardboard beak. Oblong barely made it out of the door. Aurelia bounded down the steps. Meanwhile, Gerhambury arrived in the courtyard of the Polk Land and Water Company. Facing him stood the Polk's house, 5/6 occupied by Bert and his ever-growing family, a vertical sliver by bachelor Boris. On every side sprawled outhouses and sheds storing various vehicles and workshops. The caravan had already left, laden with coracle repair materials, as well as the Polk's bizarre costume, but his own vehicle, the umpire's chair, had been left for him, the brass stair rail polished to a shine, the telescope fixed to the left of the single elevated seat, the lectern to the right for the rulebooks. Snorkel had forgotten to cancel an appointment that had, as tradition dictated, been awarded to the incumbent town clerk at the beginning of the year, and Gerhambury had no intention of surrendering this privilege. He pressed the starting piston, clambered up the steps of the tallest vehicle in town, switched on the fog lamps, and set off for the towpath. The early mist promised a fine morning. His last equinox race would, he hoped, be special. On the towpath at 4:45 in the morning, chill steamed the breath of competitors under a clear, lightening sky. Cheered to discover that others were dressed in costumes no less ludicrous than his own, Oblong's step lightened. Spectators headed north to the start, south to the finish, or to a betting tent. He could make out many school staff, none of whom had made any effort to preserve their self-respect. Unattractive if disheveled parrot came alongside, spinning a single coracle with aplomb. "It's a resident historian," she said. "Oblong, we met, remember?" Oblong remembered his inept response to her cheerful welcome at the party. He mustered a nervous grin. "Nice costume. Suits you. Double or single?" "I'm in a..." Oh. Wrong voice. "Nice costume. Suits you. Double or single?" "I'm in a double with Mr. Fangwin." "So you seek the rapids and the crocodile?" Oblong gulped. "Good God," giggled Aurelia. A dodo strode towards them with a familiar bouncing gait, paddle, pole, and a small bucket in one hand, a coracle bowling along under the other. "Fangwin," cheered Aurelia. "I thought you were extinct." "Only a question of time," replied Fangwin, turning like a model on a catwalk, the effect marred by an over-mobile beak. "Where's my... Oblong Mill Hearty. Crew, take the accessories." Mr. Oblong was thrown the pole with its squidgy boxing glove at the end, and, ominously, the bucket. "Perfect conditions," added Fangwin, looking skywards. The mad glint in his eye was back. Behind an array of willows, a cryptic conversation unfolded in whispers. On the ground, a tan-colored costume lay open, 2 foam rubber protuberances on the back. Beside it stood a coracle with 4 shoes fixed to the floor. Gyroscope can connect to the soles. They tilt as the river tilts, so compensating for our limited vision. They come with a foolproof guarantee. In the suit, Boris? Bert, we are pioneers. Encouraged by their own rhetoric, the twins clambered into their single costume. At the start, a menagerie of lost species milled around the towpath. Birds, insects, exotic animals, even the occasional dinosaur. Between a wooden rostrum on either bank hung a golden ribbon. Between the start and the walls of the town, the water meadows teemed with spectators and bicycles. You get the pole flag, Oblong, and let's hope for beginner's luck. Pole flag. Over there, over there. The headmaster's wife, Sylvia Smith, a pleasant-looking lady with well-groomed chestnut hair, stood by the rostrum, dispensing large envelopes, each containing sets of 4 cards, marked W for West or E for East, and a unique number. The cards had adhesive sides and, once drawn, were attached to the coracle pole, the side of the vessel, and the costumes of the crew. Oblong drew W4 and an encouraging smile from the headmaster's wife. Strimmer passed by, twirling his pole with the flag E7. The black and yellow stripes gave him an air of menace. Even the diaphanous wings looked more in keeping than absurd. Damn, said Fangwin on hearing the news. He's on the other side. We won't know what he's up to. Worse, nor will Gerhambury. The umpire always takes the western station. He pointed to the umpire's chair. Gerhambury sat aloft, dressed in an ill-fitting blazer and baggy cream-coloured flannel trousers, attention forever shifting from his megaphone to the rulebook. From his vantage point, Gerhambury felt uncomfortable. Everyone knew of his dismissal, and he had garnered few of the usual greetings. He suppressed the urge to explain so as not to expose Mrs. Banter, but as the frenzy of gathering racers and supporters intensified, the melodrama of the event dispelled his angst. He had too many rules to apply to be distracted by this personal tragedy. The parrot waved and waggled her orange beak. Have a whale of a time, Jonah. Watch out for the rocks, retaliated Oblong. Stop chatting up the opposition, yelled Fangwin. A peacock in full plumage strutted past, spinning a single with the tips of his fingers, the vigor of the stride a giveaway. Gregorius Jones had drawn E33. His tail sporadically fanned and contracted, obeying a device fixed to the small of Jones's back by the fashionistas of Form 6B. Fangwin was unimpressed. He always leads but never wins. Only question is, who's the lucky damsel this year? Spectators waved poles with puppet-style mascots on the end, imitating in miniature the costume worn by the entrant they supported. Oblong spotted Bomber, waving a cutout dodo, and Ags brandishing a grasshopper. W4 had at least 2 supporters. Betting tents on either shore listed the current odds on large blackboards with costume names and real identities in parentheses. Dodo/grasshopper, parentheses, Fangwin/Oblong. Loudspeakers would provide a running and falling commentary. Betting slips bore the words, "The Rotherweird Betting Company, proprietor S. Snorkel." Near the finish, south of town, close to the riverbank, the Polk Land and Water Company had a large tent emblazoned with the legend, "Coracle Casualties." The untenanted carabank stood on the towpath, ready to transport damaged coracles from higher up the course to their place of surgery. Of the Polk brothers, there was no sign. Angela Trimble, who'd drawn E37, stood motionless. A Viking, pole held upright like a spear, her flaxen hair plaited down her back. Maroon ribbons crisscrossed her legs from knee to ankle. She shut out the human sound and concentrated on the river. Somewhere upstream, deep and out of sight, the swell would be building. From the umpire's chair, Gerhambury's reedy voice delivered a stream of reminders to the gathering fleet. Downed oarsmen may return to their own coracles, but nobody else's. Rule 16, bracket 4, bracket B. A double coracle may finish with a single crewman. Rule 17. Wake up, yelled Fangwin. Chastened, Oblong leapt into the coracle and almost fell out the opposite end. It was so light. In the back, screamed Fangwin, getting more and more excited. Oblong held the view that an open circular boat had no such thing. Where's the back? I'm the front, idiot. The coracle rocked alarmingly as Oblong installed himself behind Fangwin. Tactic number 1, we go back to go forward. This further confused Oblong until he noted that the umpire's chair and a good third of the flotilla, about 40 coracles, were heading gently upstream away from the start before heading back to the line. Hit the road running, explained Fangwin. First up, you paddle and I pull. I shall ward off pirates. As they turned, the deep cobalt blue to the east turned silver. Nearby, Gerhambry issued his final warning. Rule 13, bracket C, all coracles must be within 20 yards of the starting ribbon at the start. Penalty disqualification. Then several happenings converged. A gurgling subterranean grumble slowly grew to a growl and then a roar. The water began to seethe as if coming to the boil. The sun's rim emerged from the eastern hills and cannon boomed from the northern and southern gatehouses, belching out plumes of green smoke to mark the advent of spring. Aurelia decided to pull, keeping the paddle for emergencies. You had to be careful to keep your weight central, she'd quickly learned, or the coracle went one way and you the other. Strimmer eyed the field and found little to trouble him. Jones would do the usual. Trimble he could deal with. Fangwin, surely too old to be a threat, would be further handicapped by the imbecile historian. Rock had pedigree, but no experience. No dirty work, Strimmer? Trimble wagged a finger as she passed. How would I ever? How about last year? Added Miss Trimble fiercely. Fangwin harbored similar thoughts to Strimmer about the value of his deputy. Oblong was not concentrating as a mariner should, being transfixed by the movement within the upper reaches of Miss Trimble's Viking costume. What are you gazing at? Yelled Fangwin. We're being passed by the school porter. How humiliating is that? Keep her at bay, man. Fangwin flung off his dodo beak as it clacked against his pole for the umpteenth time. Slowly but surely they picked up speed. As the boats turned back for the start, the water, silver as a fish's back a moment earlier, shone like burnished copper. Middle of the field, boomed Fangwin. Just where we want to be. Oblong kept terror at bay by musing on the origins of this tradition. Had Rotherweird been invaded by coracle, escaped by coracle, invented the coracle, or had some traveler arrived by coracle and set a fashion? Unraveling such mysteries was the historian's task. He let his imagination roam as Fangwin bent over with hand on each side of the coracle, whispered, "She's a-coming, boy, a-coming." Most had experienced the surge before, but it always differed in shape and timing. High left and low right, or vice versa, or high in the middle with curling sides. This year the river excelled itself, running high right and left with a diminishing low point in the middle, which sucked all the coracles into a heaving mass before dispersing them one way or the other. In addition to achieving survival, competitors had to keep right or left of the town in accordance with their flag. Right, and because I can't read anymore, here's a picture. This is the surge with one coracle and then many others on the river. Right, back we go. As the surge struck, Gerhambury cut the golden tape marking the start, and chaos ensued. Everyone started yelling and gesticulating as their vessel spun and collided, rose and fell. A few unfortunate debutantes put poles through the floors of their coracles. Others toppled in with little chance of reboarding until the main fleet had moved on. Onlookers cheered and jeered. Mariners cursed and encouraged, and Gerhambury noted all the infractions, consulting whenever necessary his rulebook. Whether by luck or timing, the ribbon parted as Aurelia swept through, giving her the privilege of an early lead. She felt the great grand paternal spirit in her veins as she ducked a side swipe from Strimmer's pole like a veteran. She crouched to make her center of gravity low. Many W numbers were pushed to the east and E numbers to the west, creating a scrum in midstream, even after the surge had passed. Several more tipped over. The Polk gyroscopes could not manage so much contradictory data, and the fixed shoes hurled Boris to the left and Bert to the right. With the sound of tearing Velcro, the camel suit disgorged the Polk twins. On the floor of the coracle, the shoes still twitched as if inhabited by ghosts. The brothers hauled themselves ashore. "It just needs minor adjustments. So close," declared Boris. "If you kept the accounts, you'd not be worrying about minor adjustments," replied Bert. Boris's creativity contributed as much to the family business as Bert's repairing and accountancy skills, but Boris accepted the hint of rebuke. After all, this looked to be a bumper race for business. Strimmer, meantime, was inflicting almost as much damage as the wave. He caught the poleman of a short odds crew, a pair of frogs, flush on the head. Every successful bump and strike was greeted with a self-congratulatory cry. Leaving empty coracles in his wake, the Wasp entered the eastern rudder with only Miss Trimble in front of him. Penguin kept low as Oblong shut his eyes. This was the worst of fairground rides. The coracle lurched to meet the sky, slid up one side of the bow wave, wobbled on the crest, then skidded down the back of the surge as it passed. Oblong's stomach suffered as much as his balance. Penguin looked unconcerned by being in the middle of the field. Aurelia trusted to instinct and rode the wave, the pole across her like a tightrope walker. Whether by luck or inherited judgment, she narrowly maintained her lead. Despite the big talk, Penguin allowed their coracle to drift towards the back of the pack of surviving W numbers. Having found space and plotted a route, he announced, arms akimbo, "Ladies and gents, the Penguin rotator." The dodo planted his pole and with a curious swiveling, dancing motion, spun the coracle several times and then released, achieving a skimming forward lurch. Jeering and hilarity moved to admiration, as in 5 minutes, W4, now passing under the town's western walls, overtook the parrot and edged ahead of the field on the eastern station. "Learned from the Bolivian water beetle," shouted the dodo biologist. Many rushed to bet on Penguin Oblong, and the cashiers happily took the money. Penguin had a record of colorful near misses in the Great Equinox race, but they shortened his odds just in case. As the rudder split, taking W numbers one side of the town and E numbers the other, more committed supporters of the latter poured over the North Bridge and onto Grove Gardens to keep them in view. No mariner caught the eye like Gregorius Jones, who added his own chivalric code to the rulebook, attacking only those who attacked him, and shouting out warnings to anyone he judged vulnerable to sneaky attacks by the likes of Strimmer. Above all, he practiced elegance with a twirl of the pole and a shimmer of the body after every maneuver, his resplendent tail opening and shutting all the while. From the bank and then the railings of Grove Gardens, peacock feathers waved as Form 6B cheered on their hero. Miss Trimble had the lead on the eastern station in determined mood, staring fixedly ahead, until a cry from Jones and a glance behind confirmed that action was called for. Strimmer was closing, his pole shouldered like a lance, the squidgy ball bobbing nearer and nearer the small of her back. She feigned tiredness, and then, with Strimmer poised to strike, she abruptly changed tack. Strimmer jabbed so hard at thin air that he lost balance and fell, just managing to stay aboard despite a painful blow to the shins. In her exhilaration, she did not see the recumbent Strimmer raise his pole and take careful aim. With a hiss of compressed air, the pole extended by a third of its length, and caught Miss Trimble full on the left shoulder. With a large splash, she fell overboard to a groan from the betting tent. She had been fancied as a dark horse. The extension retracted so quickly that everyone assumed Miss Trimble had lost her footing. The Wasp forged ahead to meet his rivals on the eastern side, confident that downing Trimble would deal a double blow. Strimmer was right. As in previous years, the sight of a woman in the water proved fatal to Gregorius Jones. "Jones to the rescue!" he boomed and plunged overboard. Miss Trimble was in no mood to be rescued. "Go away, you silly man," she spluttered, bosom heaving with rage. "It's all right, young woman. I teach river rescue. Sod off." After further exchanges and a swipe from Miss Trimble's paddle, Jones gave up. Both were out of the race as potential winners, although Miss Trimble, now helmetless, righted her upturned coracle, hauled herself aboard, and resumed. Jones, sitting disconsolate on a mudflat as detached peacock feathers swam away on the current to bring the news to his supporters south of the town, felt a tremor of desire. Angela Trimble had reboarded. She had shown pluck. She knew the code. To Strimmer's consternation, 3W numbers had reached the confluence of the Rother before him and were only 200 yards from the finishing line. At this critical juncture, a problem emerged with the rotator technique. After Fangwin's sustained burst, advancing years and his new retirement diet of sturdy and risotto were taking their toll. Speechless with exhaustion, Fangwin handed over to Oblong, who had not devoted hours to mimicking the movement of the Bolivian water beetle. Like a demented dancer without elegance or rhythm, the coracle jerked round and round the pole with no forward movement. Fangwin put his head in his hands and moaned as the crowd jeered or went silent, depending on their betting choices. Aurelia Rock had both rhythm and elegance. Her slight craft skimmed past Fangwin's double. Her thighs and calves ached, but she was enjoying herself. To her left, she could see Strimmer raising the pace. It would be close. "Passed by an antique dealer," snorted Fangwin. Damp and humiliated, Oblong made a final effort. He ran 2 paces, planted the pole as hard as he could, and pushed with his feet. By a miracle of timing, the coracle shot forward. Fangwin, amazed, disappeared out of the bag, and Oblong found himself high in the air. The coracle skimmed on. From his privileged vantage point, he surveyed the crowd, all of them laughing. Oblong glanced down, and a simple idea took root. He was a grasshopper. He landed in Rock's coracle, accidentally tipping her into the Rother to join Fangwin, replanted his pole, and flew high into the air once more. Strimmer surged on, left fist raised as victory beckoned. As if by a miracle, ahead of him, Oblong's empty coracle, the right way up, skimmed along. Adopting Fangwin's surfing pose, he freakishly landed like a born gymnast. Impelled by his momentum, the coracle accelerated alongside the Wasp. They broke the finishing ribbon together. Snorkel, busy calculating his profits, broke his pencil in disbelief. A tie meant 2 winners, and well-backed winners at that. Rock had finished second, third in view of the tie, and Miss Trimble fifth after a pair of bats. Gerhambury, peering through his telescope, could only agree. "Cheat!" Strimmer screamed. "Steward's inquiry." In the winner's enclosure, a scrum surrounded Strimmer and Oblong. A dripping Fangwin belatedly joined them. "He's an outsider," protests Strimmer. "He can't count, not alone." Oblong, meanwhile, was more concerned to apologize to Aurelia. "Never apologize for a smart move," she said. The umpire's chair drew up. Gerhambury savored one of those moments where the rule of law struts in plain view on the popular stage. He spoke solemnly, a judge giving judgment. Rule 37 says the winning Coraclear or Coraclears hoists the summer flag on Rotherweird church tower at noon on the day of the spring equinox. There's an asterisk to which is appended a footnote in the 1675 edition. "Get on with it, Boreham-Very," shouted a wag in the crowd. Gerhambury produced a worn diary-sized leather volume from under the lectern and turned up the relevant page. In the improbable event of a tie, the first mariner to pass the line in each winning coracle shall race the other to the top of the church tower. The first to touch the flagpole shall have the honor and privilege of raising the equinox flag. So it's Mr. Strimmer versus Mr. Oblong. "Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen," Strimmer crowed grandly to the crowd. "He doesn't know the way and he hasn't a prayer." The betting tents reopened, though not for long. Nobody would bet against Strimmer, although Oblong did receive a winding slap on the back from a soaked Miss Trimble. "Legendary leap," she said. "Quite legendary." A press of spectators and competitors in their bedraggled costumes followed Gerhambury and the two winners up the Golden Mean to the church. Even the Polks abandoned their work to watch the first tiebreak in the great equinox race in living memory. Municipal workers swiftly erected a tape to keep the crowd back. "Nervous?" said Strimmer. "You should be." Gerhambury replaced his megaphone with a starting pistol and declared the rules of the tiebreaker. The flag is, unsurprisingly, where the flagpole is. First there raises it and wins. Play fair, gentlemen. We don't want accidents. Oblong could see no scope for accidents. Strimmer knew his way round the church, and he did not. It would be over very quickly. "On your marks. Keep to your lane. Go." Oblong jumped as the pistol went off, much to the pleasure of the crowd. Strimmer ran to the front of the church, ignored the door, and started to climb stone rungs set in the outside wall. Oblong went to the door. Locked. More hilarity. "Lane!" shouted Rhombus Smith in his direction. "West!" Oblong blushed. He had not the slightest clue what was going on. Then Fangwin's voice boomed over the hubbub. "Climb, man, climb!" He could see Strimmer walking along the spine of the roof over the nave towards the tower, and the penny dropped. Strimmer was an E number, so he started at the front. He was a W number, so he must start at the rear and not go through the church, but up a sheer wall. Oblong jumped over the cemetery wall and located two parallel rows of stone rungs near the northern corner of the church's rear wall. They rose to the parapet of the tower high above him. The crowd, scenting that Oblong would provide richer entertainment, surged through the gravestones after him. Cocooned in concentration, Oblong looked only at the green-gray stone in front of him, climbing up and up until he reached the join of the nave to the tower, marked by a lip and a small gully, a gap he had to cross to reach the next run of footholds. Wooden slatted windows just above marked the belfry. Clambering over the ledge broke the spell as Oblong unwisely glanced down, and then up. Sky and building spun. A clammy sensation gripped the small of his back. Frozen by vertigo, he used a tiny red spider to restore focus. He placed his right foot on the next rung and began to climb again. The morning had been calm, and the gust of wind caught him unprepared. His gangly legs flailed like a sheet in a gale, and his right hand came away. Miraculously, he was thrown across, into and through the shutters. He clambered to his feet to see 2 large bells hanging beside 4 smaller ones, but they were nothing compared to the extraordinary frescoes. They were beautiful, and to judge from the color and relative naivete, very early. The west wall illustrated husbandry. Cornfields, harvesters, men with sickles, horses, cottages, fishermen, birds, an early version of Rotherweird with no gatehouses and no towers. The south wall showed the Rother teeming with coracles, crewed by men and women, their urgency explained by a column of armored soldiers closing on the island. Romans. He could make out the standard bearing the letters SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus. The north wall resembled a doom painting, a soldier being ushered through a cloudy door to emerge with snout and whiskers like a weasel man, while a second waited behind. Legionary prisoners, it appeared, but why dress the first in an animal mask? Oblong feared some ritual execution, a victory celebration. The base of the east wall showed a single plant with spreading green stalks and 1 flower bud. Beside the plant, a peculiar tree spread its arms, laden with blossom. In the opposite top corner, pipers played and dancers danced against a background of flowering plants and berries, an incongruous scene set against the others. The central section had been obscured by damp, reacting with the fresco's paint to produce an explosion of purple, in which, disconcertingly, due perhaps to a peculiarity of the particular pigment, isolated arms and legs survived. Below there appeared the letters MXVII. A thick carpet of dust recorded his footprints. Nobody had been there in years. A cheer from the crowd declared Strimmer's victory. Oblong could not face descending the outside wall again. He found a trapdoor bolted on his side, leading down to another room with bare walls, where a proper staircase delivered him to an alcove behind the choir. His luck had changed. The church door had been unlocked. Outside, the crowd engulfed Strimmer, throwing him into the air. Strimmer grimaced, unamused by the vulgarity of it all, as Oblong ambled past, suffering no abuse, merely ignored. The spectators began to drift home. Oblong sensed a popular unease, not with the result, but with the aftermath, which he could not place. Bravo, Oblong, the ever-loyal Boris Polk approached. I assume Gregorius messed up again. Who was the lucky lady this year? Miss Trimble. He doesn't understand that women wish to be impressed, not rescued. Sorry, gotta go. Bert's overwhelmed. It's a bumper year for repairs. Oblong walked to the journeyman's gist to find a notice nailed to the door. Closed pending new management, by order of the licensing committee. Now he understood. Rotherweirders must have been discussing the ins and outs of the great equinox race over fur de beer in the journeyman's gist for centuries. This year they were forced to drink homebrew in the churchyard. He noted a telling clue. Snorkel's name was missing. Never court unnecessary unpopularity. Oblong peered inside. Men carried cabling, and on the bar stood a toolbox with the name Slickstone Electrics in red. He felt shocked that such a conservative town could bear such a change without protest. Two notes awaited him on the front doormat. Dear Honourable Second, support appreciated, performance adequate plus. Yours in adventure, the Skipper. P.S. Shocking news about the JG. The second was barely literate. Dear Sir, you did your general person proud, you did. A. This being written dear as DERE and general as in GENNEREL and proud with a W instead of a U, and it's kind of adorable. Oblong felt he had earned a siesta, and yet sleep would not come. The belfry's frescoes danced in his head, Saxon peasantry going about their seasonal tasks. The scene did not fit the town's current hostility to countrysiders, so where had that come from? Then there was the peculiar image of the cloudy door, and the emerging human-animal clones, and the letters MXVII. He instinctively translated the Roman numerals to 1017, and with a start sprang from his bed and rushed to his sock drawer to retrieve Robert Flask's notebook. Stole car, ASC, 1017. Oblong cursed his stupidity at missing the glaring connection between MXVII and 1017. The date and the image in the frescoes of the harvester in their primitive smocks provoked a flash of inspiration. ASC referred to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. By happy coincidence, Oblong's old university notes included a printed summary of the Chronicle's coverage after 1000. The brief entry for 1017 did not make happy reading. Danes had ravaged their way from Cambridge to Northampton to Bedford, and then into Wessex, a time of unrelieved misery. Nothing connected to Rotherweird, but Oblong remained convinced he was right. King Alfred had founded the Chronicle. None of the 9 surviving versions were the same, and the original no longer existed. Copies had been distributed to various monasteries, where they had been updated by local scribes. The oldest survivor resided in Winchester. 7 of the 9 were in the British Library. His notes cited papers by an expert in early English manuscripts at the British Museum, a Dr. Pendle. Despite the fact that he was following in Flask's footsteps and breaching his contract by raking over the past, he reassured himself that a historian's duty demanded no less. The following morning, he took the caravan to Hoy and found a telephone box. After a relay through various switchboards, he reached his target. Donald Pendle? More croak than speech, the voice was dry as dust. Notebook at the ready, he introduced himself. Oblong, Jonah Oblong. I trust you live up to your name. Oblongus, meaning rather long. Oblong ignored him. I'm ringing from Rotherweird School. How strange. You're the second in 6 months. As I said to your colleague, weird comes from the Saxon for come to pass. Your fate, in other words. If you're ringing about the Chronicle, your Mr. Flask can explain. I'm afraid he's left us. This is unpaid time, Mr. Oblong. I'm sorry. There are only 2 entries, both for 1017 and similar. They end with a savage winter, but it's summer that's interesting. Oblong heard the rustling of papers. Flask must have asked the self-same question. He was definitely on the trail. Pendle croaked on. Here's Worcester. In these days, a Munster came to the Rotherweird midsummer fair to wed. The place was saved by the Green Man and the Hammer. And Winchester. Strange reports from the village of Rotherweird. A druid priest tells that a monster came to their midsummer fair with the midsummer flower. All were saved by the Green Man and the Hammer. Oblong recalled the curious flowering plant in the fresco. Can you help on the midsummer flower? Rest assured there's no such thing. I've read Beowulf's, Sir Gawain, and the Flora Britannica. I've checked the library's works on herbology, and don't ask about Norse myths. I've read them too. As for the hammer, he sounds like a sort of Dane you wouldn't want marrying your daughter, but there's no trace of him either. The green man is a universal among vegetative deities and a symbol of rebirth. Find him in churches, pagan sites, and hanging outside an excellent pub near Reading. I blame the monks. They were partial to psychedelic mushrooms. I'm mighty grateful. Yes, well, it's time for old Pendle to keep the wolf from the door. And just remember, the Saxon language has 7 vowels and 6 diphthongs, but still informs hundreds of our words, including goodbye. With that envoy, Pendle hung up. Oblong felt a ghost at his shoulder. Flask had been there before him, but he had not been prompted by the frescoes. He wondered whether Flask's note ASC 1017 had come before or after his conversation with Dr. Pendle. Moreover, how could such apparent gibberish matter? How more knowledge can deepen a mystery, he reflected ruefully. Elsewhere, the Great Equinox race was judged exceptional. The first dead heat in a century, and the outsider shown up, the grudging respect for his coraclemanship quickly displaced by his farcical failure to ascend the tower. To the universal revelry, there was but one exception. Gerhambry traipsed home, his last formal duty done. He could not raise the rent for April. A mind turned to toil would fall into disuse, coils of once hyperactive cabling gathering dust, a recipe for deep depression. Emergency outside. There's a siren that keeps going and going. Anyway, chapter 3, A Dangerous Play. The actress's research into the Sir Veronel's character stalled as soon as it began. There was nothing of note in his bedroom or library, or indeed anywhere else. Only the ground floor study held hope, but it was always locked, and Sir Veronel had the only key. Until, by a cunning sleight of hand, she managed to steal an impression in a bar of soap. Getting it to a locksmith on Ether's Way would be the next challenge. She had been housebound since their arrival. Stereotypically, a woman in her position in a comic play would find a stratagem, but she felt the role of Lady Slickstone worked better as a truth-teller. She also doubted that comedy was the right genre. I've been asked by a Mrs. Banter to tea. May I go? Sir Veronel's forehead twitched. Yes, please do, and investigate a purchase of mine. Your wretched hostess owns baubles and relics where I bought some stones. Find out where they came from, all she knows. Bargain if you have to. Her interest in him had sharpened since the party. Initially, Rotherweird had induced uncertainty, but recently he had changed, acquiring an intensity which, in her experience, his business activities had never provoked. Some grail still eluded him, but she suspected he was closing in. Anything I should know about these stones? Only that their provenance is a mystery worth solving. The actress knew better than to probe further. I'll report back, she said. With the actress out of the room, Sir Veronel summoned Rodney. I have a task for you. You may reconnect briefly with your former self. He gave his instructions, emphasizing the need for caution, and noting with pleasure the boy's increasing deference, to him at least. He then adjourned to his study to record the previous night's revelations. Frustratingly, he could not summon these lost memories of his own volition. They came only in sleep, and, with few exceptions, the earliest and deepest first. His notes remained fragmentary. He recalled his parents' disbelief at his precocious talents, his mother's suffocating affection, and his father's suspicious distance. The memory was as much intellectual as visual. He recalled how his desire for change had been satisfied by his removal to the great castle in London, and his mixed feelings at having to share with children similarly blessed, 9 to be exact. But, unlike them, he understood that force of intellect is nothing without force of spirit. The mysterious journey, the change from one cart to another, and his arrival at Rotherweird Manor, these images had returned. He recalled even the teaching regime and Grassal's library. Yet they must be preliminaries. Somehow, somewhere, by some dark miracle, he had acquired the gift of lightning. Every night he blew out the candle in anxious expectation. The actress enjoyed her walk, politely acknowledged more than ignored. Modernist productions favored free movement among your audience. Her chosen locksmith on Ether's Way made no comment on the bar of soap and promised to have a perfect key by 6. He insisted on no charge by way of thanks for the party. Valorhan's speech did not appear to have had an adverse effect. Mrs. Banter greeted her at the door in a cashmere jersey, a smart skirt, and elegant shoes. "It's so gracious of you to come, Lady Slickstone." A well-to-do sitting room suggested of moderate wealth, social ambition, and of sound but unimaginative taste would have been the appropriate stage direction. Mrs. Banter came across at first as a farce stereotype, the shallow and pushy socialite. She served China tea with a sponge cake, all the social niceties observed. "I do so like Lapsang," said the actress, setting a ladylike tone for the first 20 minutes. Mrs. Banter advised on hairdressers, the only nail parlor worthy of the name, and snorkel soirees. She dropped a few names and cut the cake. Flour spangled her lower lip. Her opening move in the real game was surprisingly direct. "I fear I have offended your husband." The actress responded in kind. "I fear you have." "Do you know how?" "He described you as greedy." Mrs. Banter changed gear. "I have been ostracized, Lady Slickstone, for my business acumen." She produced Snorkel's letter. "Your husband purchased some beads from my shop. I ensured a fair price, as no doubt he would have done in my position." The actress wondered what the script required. She felt the sense of power that improvisation brings. You act as you write her script. Should she lie or tell the truth? If the former, how should she present it? She decided that the scene needed more tension. "Is that all?" "I assumed I was excluded from the party by mistake. It seems I was wrong." "Talk me through it." Mrs. Banter gave a subtly edited version of her intervention in the sale before hinting at the solution to her predicament. "The problem with the likes of Sir Veronal and Mr. Snorkel is reaching them. I need someone of influence to intercede." The actress did not rise. She asked for a description of the stones. "Like beads without holes, but good color and unusual." "Worth what he paid?" Mrs. Banter arched her back. "For every odd object, there is a collector willing to pay. Sir Veronal understands that, surely." "Where did they come from?" Mrs. Banter's eyes narrowed. "One good turn deserves another." "I have little influence." Mrs. Banter tutted. All wives have influence. They know so much. She delivered a cold smile, and the actress felt a prickle of dislike. I like secrets too, which is why I excel at observing when unobserved. I know, for example, that this is the second time you've been out of the manor on foot. Second time? People regard between 2 and 3 in the morning as the safest hour to wander the streets undetected, but I have long sight and a commanding view. I knew Sir Vernal would come that morning to buy because I'd seen him and his young friend the night before, huddled round my shop like a couple of carol singers. That's why I dropped in just at the right time. Mrs. Banter paused to let the implications sink in. But of course, you followed that night, no doubt intrigued by such a strange outing. You weren't with them because you weren't asked, and you weren't asked because you weren't wanted. The actress revised her view. She was not sharing the stage with a farce stereotype. Mrs. Banter was an altogether deeper and darker character. Mrs. Banter's voice upped to semitone. He wouldn't tell you the whys and the wherefores, now would he? He's that kind of man, the sort who does not like to be followed, and you're expected to be that kind of wife. Mrs. Banter paused. From her bag, she produced a leather-bound notebook. On its spine, the actress saw the initials SA-SL. Mrs. Banter patted the book with a proprietorial air. You left the manor at 2:13 in the morning. The actress allowed herself a half smile at this intriguing turn of events. Mrs. Banter might not be what she seemed, but then, nor was she. The actress countered neatly. He may require an apology. He may even want to recruit you. He's like that. Recruitment? Mrs. Banter's hatred dissipated. To join the retinue of a knight of the realm? The hard edge to her voice softened. Help me, Lady Slickstone. I never forget a favor. Then tell me where the stones came from. When I'm reinstated to my proper station, I shall do so with pleasure. By way of reply, the actress summoned a nuanced facial expression, implying an understanding between women. The key she collected on the way back. Hopefully, she now had the wherewithal to hoist her part to new levels. True to her interpretation of Lady Slickstone as a risk-taking truth-teller, she revealed to Sir Vernal that Mrs. Banter snooped on her fellow citizens. Surprisingly, Sir Vernal seemed more interested in this news than Mrs. Banter's refusal to assist on the provenance of the stones before her restoration to high society. Let her stew, he said, then we'll see. 3 words of dismissal, 3 words pregnant with some unspoken plan for the future. Annoyingly, Sir Vernal still had all the lines. Now, I've got like 2 pages of old history. Is everyone up for reading those, or would you like to stop here? Thumbs up for more? Cool. Old history. 1570, the Rotherweird Valley. Hieronymus says autumn starts the day after the last full moon in August. He says he can tell from the dew and the spiders. Morval Seer holds up her paintbrush. She sits beside a tangle of hawthorn by the river. Her hair is plaited, thick, fine and golden. Pig's bristle, whispers Slickstone, his breath catching her neck. You're a swineherd's daughter, he implies. Count yourself lucky to have my attention. Her skin tightens as he runs his finger from her shoulder to her elbow. She shrugs him off. Who do you think you are to say no to me? There is ugliness and ugliness, she replies. She enrages him, speaking back, accusing him of ugliness of spirit. God, he wants her. The other women, I have had all three. You'll find me expert. You think it's a science, do you? How would you know? Or are you and that brother of yours bedfellows? She hits him with the back of her hand, not hard, a gesture. He smiles. He shows no respect. He will be punished. Hieronymus is Hieronymus. Yet he catches the quaver in her voice. The hostage, the oldest card in the pack. You'll need a special friend, or his punishment will be harsh. He will not win this particular game, he knows that. She will draw and color for the Eleusinians to save her brother, but that's only, and Winter will protect her so long as she does. He leaves her by the river, trying to catch the tumbling water in paint. Her own words sow the idea. You can tell from the spiders. He will bide his time, and then when her painting is done, she will learn not to fence with him. There is ugliness and ugliness. Terrible. 1571, Rotherweird Manor. 10 years pass from Winter's usurpation, the course set from the beginning of his rule. Experiment, experiment, experiment. They spend 3 days a week in Lost Acre, the remainder in record keeping and analysis. Fortement is excused, as Winter shares his obsessive interest with celestial movement and the dynamics of force. Fortement knows that orthodox theory, with its structure of crystalline spheres, is wrong. There are moving bodies in the heavens that would smash them to smithereens. From time to time, Winter insists on access to his notes, where Fortement is exploring the interrelationship between the Rotherweird Valley and Lost Acre. Hieronymus Seer himself, pursuing the life he led under Sir Henry, studying unsullied nature in the confines of the Rotherweird Valley. He justifies his inertia on the pusillanimous ground that nature will win through in the end. But in truth, he has left his sister to languish and prostitute her gifts. She illustrates the successful experiments, if they can be so described, in the Roman recipe book. Roman being a childish anagram for manor. She does so only to spare her brother, but she knows their time is running out. As in a fairy tale, where death comes with the last leaves fall, the book tells her fate. Now there is but one leaf left to fill. Her beauty she feels is wasted. She loves Fortement, but does not dare risk the consequences. The others envy her beauty, all the more for her celibacy. The experiments have long ago moved beyond the mixture of mere animal and bird, or fish and insect. Slickstone gathers children from the valley's peasant families, and when they run out, the slums of London. These constructs mostly fail. Secretly, she keeps a second book with Fortement's help of these half-viable failures and the stone's positioning. Maybe one day the process can be reversed and they can be restored to their former selves. Then comes the strike. Hieronymus Seer disappears. She hears malevolent talk about a visit to the mixing point, and then the mirror in the forest. Fortement has vanished too. That night, Winter comes and makes her fill the final page. This time, there is no creature, just the stones in allotted positions and human silhouettes of no consequence. A soldier, a jester, and the like. Bull lingers in the doorway, Lengths of rope over his arm, a lopsided cat twined around one knee. Winter speaks portentously. I am betrayed. My time is nearly come. You must seek death to find resurrection. So this is Winter's madness, Morval realizes. A craving for divinity. He smiles, and Bull does too. Gods have their monstrous guardians, he adds, and the best need angels and demons. He adds as if it were a gift. You will have long life. The sky in Lost Acre is dark as pitch. The Eleusinians stand away from the tree for safety as the storm gathers. They usually jeer and cheer, but not today. They are rapt. Slickstone's cage is of iron, not wood, and in touching distance of the mixing point, only the thinnest of threads holding it back. He is dicing with death. The other men had been weak, choosing to create familiars rather than go in themselves. The bizarre creatures sit on the shoulders or flutter around their heads. He does not think to ask what Winter has done with the women. Women are there to serve, after all. Only Slickstone seeks to take power to himself. The sky crackles. The bolt strikes. Slickstone screams as the cage careers into the mixing point, sparking as it goes. They wait. Seconds seem like hours. Then the cage swings out and Slickstone bellows. He is Zeus, a god. He feels the power deep in his being, there to be summoned, but for the moment he holds him in check. He holds it in check. Let them wait. A second cage waits, this time made of wood. Marvel Seer stands beside it in a white shift like a classical sacrifice. Nearby has a recipe book in which she has made her last entry. Winter is strangely subdued. Slickstone wonders, is he weakening? It is too late now for mawkishness. Sentence has been passed. She is placed in the cage, to its allotted place in its allotted bar. He does not want her dead. He wants her monstrous. Into the wooden prison she goes with her 8-legged friend, a huge misshapen creature from Lost Acres forest, trapped at his request by his good friend the Weasel Man. The cage swings into the mixing point. He notes the greedy looks on the women's faces. They have lived too long with her beauty and innocence. The chain judders, and Slickstone knows the moment it re-emerges that he has achieved vengeance beyond measure. Even the Eleusinians recoil, even the women. Now is the time. He will make the Spider-Woman dance all the way to the forest, and there Morval can hide her shame. Blue light plays across his fingers.
Oh, he's the worst.
He is so terrible. He's so bad. I hate him. I hate him. Ugh.
Yeah. Ugh. Ugh. All around.
Yep. Like I couldn't resist. I had to make a face when I was reading that because ugh. Ugh. Ugh.
Ugh. Indeed.
The dude that modern Slickstone dreams about is pretty evil, but is modern Slickstone also evil? I mean, he's dreaming about him, but...
Yeah, modern Slickstone doesn't seem to have a lot of character development just yet, or even any parts.
Yeah.
But he does do some sneaky things, like seemingly being behind bad stuff that happens to people.
Yeah, I'm
Mostly, yeah, because he's the outsider and people are like, oh, it must be the outsider if shit's happening. Because, it all happens after he comes by, so it must be him that's triggering all these things.
definitely the perfect time for anyone lingering to strike.
Hmm. So yeah, aside from the ending showing him what a terrible man he is, how did you like the race?
Oh, Joanna's face right now.
Yes. Your face is everything, Joanna.
Yeah, pretty much that's how I feel about it.
It's weird. It goes from these like really, really nasty stuff to let's celebrate.
Yes. It's the equinox race.
Outside of a church. Because obviously.
What was it with the outside of a church?
I said, let's randomly race up the outside of a church, because obviously.
Well, if it has bits to climb on, then why not?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Not
the
sure
frescoes?
Well, I'm not sure I've ever met a church I could climb.
No, me neither, but we're in a fantasy world, anything can happen.
I used to climb buildings in university. I don't think I've ever climbed a church, but I've climbed hotels and student halls and
Yeah, churches tend to have quite smooth, tall walls. Even the ones that are falling apart to not have enough spaces to latch your feet into.
really old ones though can be rough stone.
Yeah, those could be good.
Yeah, really old ones have good chances of having little jutting out bits.
Mm-hmm.
This one sounded like it was designed for it though, like it had a stone ladder.
It did sound like it.
Yeah.
But nobody's been on the inside for hundreds of years,
Dun,
supposedly.
dun, dun.
I'm interested in where this is going. What I like about this book is I really don't fucking know where it's going.
Thing is, I've read this book and I don't know where it's going.
I read this in the sequels more recently and I know where it's going, and I'm so excited to give you where it's going bit by bit.
Do you know about how much longer, how many more sessions you think we'll be doing this for? Okay, so another 2-3 weeks?
So we got to this little yellow marker. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more chunks.
Wait.
So almost 3 weeks.
Sweet. Good. I'll be around for the finale.
2 weeks and 2 sessions. Unless anyone wants to have an intermission at some point and we finish on a Thursday.
Intermission.
See how
As
life
in,
goes.
if anyone like to read anything in the meantime and they're like super stoked to do a one-off thing, I'm happy to do an intermission to finish this on a Thursday.
Cool.
And this is recorded, so anyone that might hear it can come up and be like, yes, me.
Also happening this week is poetry time on Sunday. The theme is innuendo, as it is poetry time number 69. So bring all of your innuendo-y poems or things that are quite crass, and we'll start like more like, subtle innuendo, keep it pretty light, and just like delve deeper and deeper into whatever kind of hole we decide to dig ourselves in.
I may have that book of poems about sex that has a lot of terrible poems.
So yes, I don't think there's anything else going on this. So that's everything. Shall we say goodbye to the catch crew?
Yeah. Do we have any wisdom about to tell the catch-up crew?
If you're ever in a coracle race, make sure you have a good teammate. Someone to handle the pirates for you,
Yeah, and maybe have a look at the Bolivian water beetle. You might learn something. And with that, catch-up crew, we love you. Good night.